On Perspective this week, Moreblessing Pedhuru is supporting a project to assist women in Zambia who find themselves in difficult circumstances. We'll also hear from Liz Charter and Tim Earl later in the programme about their work to establish the West Foundation for Gambian Wildlife and Communities. But first, Moreblessing Pedhuru.
Thank you for having me, Phil. My name is Moreblessing Pedhuru. I've just moved to the island in October last year, October 2022.
So relatively new to the island. And what brought you over?
Yes, relatively new. I got offered a job by the Isle of Man government when I was working in Zambia last year. So that's why I'm on the island.
And your accent would indicate that you're not from the British Isles, certainly originally.
No, I'm not. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I was born in Zimbabwe. And I moved to the UK in 2024 to study there. I did a master's in highways engineering in the UK. And then after that, I got offered a job with Highways England. The plan was always that I would go back home after my studies. But I got headhunted after my master's. I was offered a job and I stayed there. Before I knew it, it was 15 years until 2019. And then in 2019, I was missing home. I wanted to go back closer to my mom. She was getting on in age. So I looked for a job and I got a job in Zambia, which is close enough to Zimbabwe. So I moved to Zambia in 2019 March. And I worked there for 3.5 years until May last year, 2022. And then I got an offer here.
And Zimbabwe, I mean, I think if anyone follows the news, they'll probably know that it's been in quite a difficult position, Zimbabwe. Are things improved now, or is it still quite fraught over there?
Yes, things have been difficult economically in Zimbabwe. We are hopeful because for us it's home. I grew up in Zimbabwe, and so I'm still hopeful that things can only get better. Things are not as good as they should be at the moment. It's a beautiful country. It's a rich country full of natural resources. But we are hopeful that things will get better soon and things will be good for everyone.
And one of the reasons that you were keen to come on this programme was you're actually trying to raise some funds for a project that you've got back home.
Yes, so I'm leading a project that is supporting women that are coming from domestic violence and toxic relationships, and also girls that have fallen out of school due to teen pregnancies at young age. So the aim of the project is just for us to give the women a second chance, to give them a respite. So we are building a home, a safe home for the women and girls, and also a skills academy. So the idea is that if women are struggling, or if we identify girls that need some support, we will bring them to the safe house. And then when they've had a chance to rest and get counseling, and when they're in a good place mentally and physically, then they can go to the skills center and get some upskilling. We are doing sustainable agriculture there. We are training people in home economics and value addition of agricultural products. So the idea is once somebody has come out of a marriage, some of them, they don't have any skills. So if we give them a safe place to stay and then they get some support and then we give them some life skills, the hope is that they'll go away and start life all over again. So that's the project I'm fundraising for.
And presumably at the moment, well, well, you tell me, I suppose, because I'm supposed to ask the questions, not answer them. What facilities are there currently for people who are in those circumstances?
So So this facility is going to be in Zambia. When I was working in Zambia, I managed to buy 2 pieces of land there. So we are developing this facility in Zambia. Normally, we don't get things like social services where women can go and get some support. So that's why I thought, probably from my own life experience, I wanted to give other women some support. I've gone through a difficult time myself. I've been married twice and divorced twice. And when I was in that place, particularly my second divorce, it was quite a rough time for me. I got divorced during the time when my mom was poorly and she eventually died. So I was still very fragile emotionally due to my mom's passing. And then the marriage also took a tumble and it collapsed. And on top of that, the contract that I had in Zambia also came to an end. So all of a sudden, I found myself without a job, without a marriage, and I lost everything that I had in that marriage. I lost the house that we had, the savings that we had together. It was a pretty scary place to be. The saving grace for me is that I am a professional. There was hope for me to get another job. And during that time, I got some support from close friends of mine. Just somebody giving me a call to say, how are you doing? How can we help? My son was still in boarding school that time, like an international boarding school. And at that particular time, I couldn't afford to pay his school fees because things were very rough due to the broken marriage. But because I had friends, I got some support. And then I got offered this job here at the Isle of Man. And when I was at that point, I thought of other women who don't have skills, women who don't have social support, so to speak. And I thought of the girls culturally where I come from. If a young girl gets pregnant out of wedlock, you get castigated, you can get thrown out of home and you find yourself probably homeless. So I thought of those 2 scenarios to say, I am struggling, but I'm also a professional woman. There's hope for me. But then there are some women who will find themselves in a broken marriage, or they can persevere in a toxic marriage because they've got nowhere else to go. And then when I was in that, I had started doing this work, working with women for a while, but I was just doing it casually. But when I found myself in a similar position, I thought I needed to pursue this vigorously. I thought there was a need to fill that space and give other women some support. And so I had already bought these 2 pieces of land, and then I thought I need to start building it quickly. I'd just been supporting it from my own resources and my young sister. So we had built a pigsty. It's half done. It's at roofing level, and we built 2 poultry houses. Each house takes 1,500 beds at a time. We also drilled a borehole that is at the Skills Academy. And we built also a 5-roomed cottage for people to stay in there. And we put security fence and solar panels. That is at the Skills Academy. And then at the Safe House, it's only starting. We are building some chalets there and some apartments where the women can come. So we have started construction. We started beginning of March 2023. And there's a building that is going up. It's a 4-bedroomed apartment. It's still under construction. It's early days yet. So that's why I'm doing this. I just thought there are some women who will struggle, and probably they will end up living all their lives in a very bad relationship because they've got nowhere else to go. And some, if they decide to come out, if you come out with 2 children, for instance, and you don't have anywhere else to go, the likelihood is that you will come out and you will go back again to that relationship because you can't sustain yourself.
And for people listening to this, that they no doubt will think that you have a big ambition, but actually building in Africa is substantially cheaper in many countries than it would be in the Isle of Man. I remember when I was engaged with the International Development Committee of the Isle of Man government working and funding projects in Africa, for the price of a single secondary school in the Isle of Man, you could almost rebuild most of the schools in a relatively small country in Africa for the same sorts of monies. So you can actually achieve quite a lot with a relatively small amount of money, can't you?
Yes, things are relatively cheap. It's because labor is relatively cheap. So some of the work that we are doing at the Safe House and at the Skills Academy, we are actually working with some of the women and some of the girls, because we have a vegetable garden that is already thriving. We have an orchard that is already thriving. So some of them, they come and work, maybe just helping us to weed and pick stones that they can crush to become quarry for the building. And probably we just give them produce from the farm, because all they need is food at the moment. So we give them a little bit of money and we give them some food from the garden and from the field, and they'll be happy with that. And all they want, probably some of them, they want to just spend a day away from an intense environment at home. So when they come to the skills center, it's a social activity for them, but we also pay them something a little bit. And things like bricks, we can buy bricks relatively cheap, because there are a lot of raw materials, and sometimes we can even make our own bricks. So that makes the construction quite easy.
Mm-hmm. And if anyone listening is interested in trying to help and maybe support you in this project, where's the best place for them to actually go about doing that?
My phone number is 076 2425 7275. That's 076 2425 7275.
Okay. And have you got anything like a Facebook page or a donation page at all?
Yes, I do have a donation page. It's on GoFundMe. It's under the name of Moreblessing Pedhuru Baka. You'll find me also on LinkedIn. There is a fundraising campaign that I've put on LinkedIn. It's linked to that GoFundMe page.
And
yes.
Moreblessing is as it would sound in terms of the spelling, isn't it?
Yes, it's more and blessings, just as you would say bless you.
Yeah.
It's all one word, more blessing.
Yeah. So yeah, and well, certainly I hope that we can have you back to talk about how the project's developing in the future. But fantastic that you are putting so much of your resource and effort into trying to help people. It's in your country, isn't it? In Zimbabwe.
It's in Zambia.
Oh, in Zambia.
It's in Zambia. That's where I've been for the past 3.5 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's something that I'm passionate about. I'm a civil engineer by profession, so I'm also very passionate about making a difference through the provision of infrastructure. So I just thought the construction of a safe house and the construction of Skills Academy would go a long way to support women that are in need. I think it's always satisfying to give rather than receive. That's how I see it.
And it's not that many people who actually do see the world in that way, and it's quite refreshing, I think, to find someone who does.
I would like just to say we live in a global village, and we are each other's keeper. We are each other's neighbor. And so I think somebody else's need would be my need, because if I help somebody up, I think somebody said we rise by lifting each other up. So that's how I see life. We rise by lifting each other up, and the situations that we face in life, they are not meant to crush us. They are meant to build us up, so that we can share those experiences in a positive way with the rest of the world.
Liz Charter and Tim Earl established the West Foundation for Gambian Wildlife and Communities. Tim tells us a bit about the foundation.
Yeah, it's a charity based in the Gambia, and its aim is to raise money from wildlife sites in the Gambia and use that money to the benefit of the communities close by, working on the theory that if people are gaining from a wildlife site, then they will want to look after that wildlife site. So Liz and I have set up a charity down there, and that's exactly what it does. We put in birdwatching hides into the sites, charge birdwatching tourists, of which there are many in the Gambia, for going into the hides, and then we apply that money, or a big proportion of it, to the local communities for projects. We're particularly keen on water, because water is such a liberating thing to put into a community.
And why the Gambia? Any particular reason?
Well, Tim's had a long connection with the Gambia, and so have I, completely independently. So my connection with the Gambia dates back to a radio interview in 2005 when I heard Anita Smith talking on Women's Hour about the Bansang Hospital appeal. And I was so impressed by what she was able to achieve with her small charity, with direct contact with the Gambians. And she rescued some very decrepit health facilities in Bansang. And then I discovered that Tim had a connection there too from his touring days.
Yes, it must be serendipity, because backing onto the hospital site, almost touching it, is a sand quarry. And that sand quarry, it's quite big, is home to about 500 pairs of one of the most beautiful birds you could ever hope to see, a bird called the red-throated bee-eater. They're stunning creatures, and they nest in holes in the sandbank. So it was really odd that I should come across this quarry and Liz should come across a wonderful hospital next to it. And in fact, we're talking to Anita Smith at the moment about areas where there might be synergy between our project and her hospital, which would be very, very good.
And for people who aren't familiar with West Africa, it's quite an impoverished part of the world, isn't it?
It most certainly is, yes. You Phil, will be aware of that. West Africa, in particular, suffered very badly from the slave trade. People think about the communities in America and in the Caribbean that are impoverished due to the fact they had slavery as their roots. But very few people think about what the effect was on West Africa to have 18 million strong, healthy men, women and children taken out of those communities and shipped across the Atlantic, if they were lucky. And the effect it's had on West Africa is huge, and it is really one of the most stricken areas in the world, as far as I'm aware.
And of course that means more than just not having enough money to pay for things like food, but the area that you're interested in there, Liz, with regards to healthcare, that is equally a difficult thing to access, isn't it?
Certainly is. The Bansang Hospital actually has a catchment area that stretches into Senegal, up into Mali. People come a long, long way to get there in very, very difficult terrain, and it's fantastic what Anita Smith has been able to do, and I've been supporting that for quite a few years now.
And well, I don't know. You tell me. Is healthcare free at the point of access as it would be in the Isle of Man, or is it more difficult than that?
It is, but there's still the cost of, say, food for the patients. That's not something the government provides for, so the hospital is having to find a way of improving the diet of the people who are there as patients. And one of the things they're doing at the moment is they've created a fish farm, and we've been hearing about the stocking of the fish farm from Anita, and how they're going to supply protein. And of course the cost of fish has gone up and up and up as the resources along the coast have gone down, with foreign ships plundering their coastline so that the local fishermen are not getting the fish. We had a fantastic visit on our last trip there to Tangi, which is a fishing community, and it's an exciting place to be when the fishing boats come in the afternoon, and everybody's pushing wheelbarrows full of fish, and there are gulls overhead and terns and noise and market and bustle and masses of activity, and all that fish is then being moved inland, taken up the river and being sold in markets in Banjul and places. It was very exciting.
But what you can't see in Tangi are the fishing fleets that are just offshore, that are plundering with commercial fishing, huge commercial fishing fleets, plundering the fish stocks out there, and that then gives rise to high prices for fish when the people in Tangi eventually do get to land them. The prices are much higher than people can afford, and fish is a huge source of protein. As Liz said, it's taken right the way upriver. Fortunately, nowadays they've got good roads leading up to the higher reaches of the Gambia, but the fish is just out of people's pockets now. That it's just too expensive.
Yeah, I remember when we were, Isle of Man government was supporting the government of Sierra Leone in relation to fisheries. Something like 90% of all protein that the people accessed came from fish that was caught at sea. So it was a really big deal to be able to protect the fishery. And sadly, I think the World Bank programme that was working out in West Africa seems not to be as comprehensive as it used to be now. But in the other thing that perhaps people who don't know about West Africa, the Gambia, is that people see the environment as a resource that they can exploit. So trees, for example, are often chopped down to make into charcoal, which is a cheap or relatively cheap fuel. Presumably, that's the very last thing that you want these people to be doing. You want the trees there so that the birds have places to roost and the like.
That's absolutely right. The major parts of the habitat upriver are being exploited very heavily for charcoal, and there are huge lorries that go up and buy the big sacks of charcoal and take them back down into Banjul, where they're sold at a profit, obviously, for people to cook on. And one of the drives of a number of charities out in the Gambia, and I expect in other parts of West Africa too, is focused on cooking and how fuels that don't rely on chopping down native forests can be developed. But that's outside our brief. There's not much we can do as two individuals on that. The brief that we've set ourselves is to try and get more money out of tourism, so that that goes into the communities. The big problem with the Gambia is that most of the tourism goes on along the coast, It's a resort-based tourism, so people get into a hotel and never come out of it until they catch the plane back again. And the hotels are owned by foreign companies. So while it's giving employment, and that's a good thing, the profits and all the benefits of that tourism tend to go elsewhere. And what we're really trying to do is to exploit the resource, so that, and then channel that exploitation into the local communities.
We should mention that there is a third party in this project, which is Dembo Sonko, who is our local guide, and is really it's his enthusiasm and his initiative that's keeping this going on the ground, because obviously we're here and he's there. He lives in Lamin on the not far from the river, and has his family there, and he's out. He's a bird guide. He's amongst the association of bird guides. He has good contacts, and he finds out where the needs are and has set up all sorts of things. And really, we are his support in what he's doing.
And of course, poverty in reality means that people in his position generally don't have access to funds to be able to generate the sorts of things that you're able to do. So you don't get the tourists coming in because he doesn't have the resource to promote it, because the money is exceptionally scarce. So presumably that's a big help.
That's quite right. And in fact, he is a brilliant man. He started off as a 3-year-old. His father died as a three-year-old. He lived in a mud hut. His mother used to walk 500 yards down to a standpipe to get water. So he had very, very humble beginnings. And he saw people using local guides to go bird watching. He thought, cool, that's a good way to earn some money. I can identify, or I can spot birds. He learnt the birds of the Gambia, which was a big task because there are more than 800 species. That's the same number in the Gambia, a tiny little country, as in the whole of Europe. And Gosh. He learnt the whole lot. He learnt their calls, and he started taking people out. And he built himself up. We looked upon it. He became a guide for tours that I was taking out there. I was working for a wildlife tour company as a tour leader, and he was our local guide. And I made sure with every tour that he had a big tip, maybe as much as £200 or £300, which was way over a year's salary for him. And to my astonishment, he built himself a house out of tips. He just, every time he got tips, he built a house. And I thought, this is an enterprising bloke. And eventually, we got some money together and we bought him a minibus. And one of the sources of income for the foundation is that minibus. It was a pump priming exercise. By giving him the resources, he could then go out and do so much more and earn quite big money. Well, certainly as far as the Gambia is concerned, very big money. He employs a driver, and it's just brilliant. You just tiny little bits of help set people off, and that's what he's done. He's a brilliant bloke, and we have great confidence and faith in him. He goes up to Bansang regularly to look after the reserve that we've got there. We're in the process of building a wall around it because people have been coming in and fly tipping. Well, it's not even fly tipping. We think it was the official dumping site for the town at one time. It was a terrible mess. I was heartbroken when I saw it after COVID. And he's cleared it all up, and we're putting a wall in to stop people doing it. And he's just got so much drive. It's brilliant. So we sit back and prime the pump, and away he goes. It's terrific.
And in terms of the reserve, then, what sort of size, what sort of acreage is it?
I should think 4 or 5 acres altogether.
It's not very big.
It's not huge, but it's basically a sandbank, about 30 feet high, 35 feet high, something like that. And in front of that is a pool, and then a waste area leading up to the top of a little rise. And the idea is that we're going to put in a guardian who will be full-time there, very small salary, it's something like 50 quid a month. It's not a huge amount of money, but he'll then collect the funds and we'll apply those to the community behind. The pond tends to get stagnant in the dry season, so we're putting in a borehole which will supply water to the pond. It doesn't need very much. Most of the water will be piped across a small road and into the local community, which is desperately poor. It's as poor as anywhere I've seen in the Gambia. It really is very poor. So they'll have water on tap, and that immediately liberates the women in that community in particular. If they don't have to walk miles a day going backwards and forwards carrying water, they can do other things. They can use the water that comes out of the tap for growing crops. They can, if they've got time and the inclination, they can go and get a job, which they can't do if they're going backwards and forwards collecting water. So it's a hugely liberating exercise. It's brilliant. We put in a well in a little village on the north bank, and we were touched, weren't we, when we went to see the effects of this well. They've developed a garden that they're growing salad crops in. The wife of the chap I had contact with has got herself a job. They're now able to afford to educate their very severely disabled child. He's profoundly deaf and dumb. Well, dumb comes because he's deaf, of course, but he's profoundly deaf, and he's got other disabilities as well. But they can now afford to send him to school, and it's all because a well was put down. It's as simple as that, and it's brilliant. And it's brilliant.
Relatively small sums of money make a big difference, don't they? Yeah.
And now that the foundation's working, the minibus and also a tractor that we've bought out there, they're generating funds that are going into the foundation and through the foundation into these communities. Fantastic. I have to tell you a funny story. Dembo built his own house out of tips, 4 bedrooms, sitting room, kitchen, a cooking area outside, really, and everything en suite. Fantastic. But he got no water. So he got bedrooms that were en suite with lavatories you couldn't use, with showers you couldn't use, hand wash basins you couldn't use, just a big bucket of water that was brought in every morning. So I said to him, "Come on, Demba, we'll put in a borehole for you." So we put in this borehole, and I went to see it, and to my astonishment, he got 2 containers up on big stands. They have 2,000-litre containers, and he got 2 of these things. And I said to him, "You really do not need 2 containers for this house of yours." And he said, the second one's for the community, he said. And sure enough, he put a pipe through the wall, and there was a standpipe close to his local community. They had been going, as he had, they'd been going 500 yards down the road to a standpipe, and suddenly all these people round about come to the local pipe, and they're away. It's brilliant.
And 500 yards doesn't sound too far if you're going for a walk, but of course you go for a walk with an empty, large sort of container, and then you come back with a very heavy, large container
on your head.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. And of course, the other thing to remember, I mean, in some parts of the world, boreholes are a problem because there isn't that much water falling from the sky, and the boreholes are using up a fairly valuable water resource that's not going to be there forever. Whereas, well, I mean, we can never talk about forevers, can we? But there's lots of rain falls from the sky. It's just it evaporates fairly quickly.
It's huge amounts, and a lot of it's going down through the River Gambia and percolating out into the communities. The communities are very close to the river. We always have when we put in a borehole, we always have the water tested to make sure we're not poisoning the people that we're trying to help. That's that's hugely important. But water, subterranean water, isn't a problem in the Gambia. It's so low lying. I suppose the biggest problem might be that the ingress of salt coming through because the River Gambia's tidal up to about 100 miles inland, something like that. It's a very, very flat country, so there's plenty of water. The quarry that we've got floods in the winter time, or in the rainy season. Think of it as the winter. It's our summer, but it floods in that rainy season to a depth of maybe 10 feet. It's a huge amount of water, and we can't imagine how much rain comes down during the wet season. I'm looking forward to going out there during the rains one year. I'll probably die of malaria if I do, but I'd certainly like to see the effect of really intense rain on the habitats.
Yes, I don't think anyone who in the Isle of Man thinks that they've witnessed a heavy rain shower. They really do need to witness rain falling from the sky in those sorts of countries where they have very intense rainfall.
Yeah.
I remember one occasion driving along a road in Sierra Leone, and it was baking hot and everything was parched, and you could imagine that there would never have ever been any rain there. And within 5 minutes the rain had come and the road was impassable. There was that much water on it.
Yeah.
It was absolutely incredible.
It's almost as though the world's turned upside down when it comes down, isn't it? It's just torrential. You mentioned the exploitation of habitats, and we were talking about charcoal. But the other exploitation is eating the wildlife, and that's a big problem. It's not so bad in the Gambia. There aren't many people hunting in the Gambia. There's not much to hunt. The bird life is exotic, but there aren't the mammals that you get in other parts of Africa. But what happens in places like Madagascar is utterly tragic. The COVID pandemic resulted in tourism worldwide stopping, and because of that, in Madagascar in particular, they had nothing, and Madagascar's as poor as West Africa. They were going out killing the lemurs that people would pay to go and see. So when tourism stops, then you suddenly realise that it's not all bad. We think about air miles flying out to Madagascar, which is a long way, but without tourism, there's nothing left. They just eat the lot, bushmeat. And you see people standing by the side of the road holding up dead lemurs for people to eat. Oh, terrible.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, isn't it? I mean, I remember again our driver when I was in Freetown used to be the striker for the Sierra Leone national football team, and he would regularly, as we were driving around Freetown, he'd, oh well, of course here this all used to be forest and there were loads of monkeys, but they're all gone now, and you know in even the short time I was going out to Sierra Leone, you saw the massive expansion of urban settlement into when I went. I mean, I was only out there for about 5 years, going occasionally, and in 5 years there was this huge expansion of the city, and all the wildlife, all the monkeys, anything that was there was very quickly shot and ate by the people. Because they have so little resource, there's so little for them.
And of course, if you're eating primates, that is a prime way of introducing new diseases into the human population. It really is a very dangerous thing to eat primates, but it happens.
Well, on a more positive note, then, what can if someone was wanting to go on one of your tours, what would they see?
The wildlife of the Gambia is split into sections depending on the habitat that you go into, and it's split into two different categories: the resident stuff, which is there year round, and what we would call winter visitors, because they're our birds that go down there for the winter. So on a typical holiday, we would have maybe a week on the coast in reasonably good accommodation. It's not 5-star, but then you're not paying 5-star prices. Reasonably good accommodation, and we would cover the coastal birds and the dry forest that's just inland of that. Dembo has set up a nature reserve in one of these forests, and he's training his niece to become a wildlife guide, which is very unusual for a woman to go into that sort of business. But he's keen on that sort of development of women's rights. After that, we would spend 3 or 4 days going up to the old capital of the Gambia, which is on an island in the middle of the river, about 200 miles upriver. It was called Georgetown in the colonial days, but now that it's gone back into home rule, as so to speak, it's gone back to its original name of Yang Bura. And the birds inland are quite different from those on the coast. So people coming with us have this experience of going upriver. And the further upriver you go, the more rural it becomes, the more poverty there is. And I suppose we'd look upon it as quaint to see mud huts with thatched roofs, but that's the way of life out there, and we do experience that as well. We try to take people into places that they wouldn't see as ordinary tourists, and Liz, you're very keen on this side of it, aren't you?
Well, one of the highlights is taking people on boat trips, and the boat trips are really thrilling. You can get up into the mangrove swamps and see the water birds really close up. And for photographers, it's just brilliant because they don't have any real impact on the bird life. They can get really close, and it's one of the highlights. We see hippos occasionally and crocodiles, as well as exciting water birds, colourful kingfishers, big herons and storks, and the daytime nighttime bird. Many people will know this from that crazy YouTube video of the bird that catches fish under its umbrella of its wings, so it creates a bit of shade, and then the fish come in underneath it, thinking that's a good place to go and get eaten. We do see some lovely things from these boat trips. They're a bit hair-raising at times, and sometimes you have to wait for them to get organised and find life jackets and things, but it's always a thrilling experience. That.
But you like the markets and the craft stalls and all.
There are some lovely handmade things as well, as you get in many African countries. But one of the highlights for us recently has been the fabrics. We've been bringing back wonderful African fabrics, and I've always been really admiring of women and what they wear, because although they're living in poverty, they actually have some wonderful outfits, and because they're being handmade often by relatives, they're able to come out to the market looking fantastic. Can't resist taking photographs of these beautiful outfits. And on my first trip there, Dembo's wife took me shopping to buy fabric and have an outfit made up like that. So I'm looking forward to wearing that again.
And I suppose then, because we are coming towards the end of the programme now, how do people get in contact? How potentially could people from the Isle of Man support, and indeed why should people from the Isle of Man support your charity?
We up until now we haven't done any great fundraising for the charity. It was set up after the death of my mother. My mother married one of my father's best friends after my father died, and between them they had a little bit of money which happily was passed down to us with the instruction of doing good with it. So up until now we've funded it all and been glad to. But if people want to contribute, we can be contacted all sorts of ways, but through the Manx Ornithological Society, Manx Wildlife Trust, we're active with them. Manx BirdLife because of my teaching, or just ask any bird watcher and they'll put. We seem to be go-to people for some of the bird watching things. During lockdown, I set up a Facebook page called Manx Birds from My Window. We have 2,500 people subscribed to it. So that's another good way to find us. Just go to Manx Birds from My Window and leave us a message, and we'll be in touch.
We also have a Facebook page. In the last month,
Oh,
we've
yes.
set up the Facebook page for the foundation, a foundation for Gambian wildlife and communities, and we've also got a Just Giving appeal as well on that. So we've raised £700 in about a week, I think. We've still got a little way to go, but it's doing well.
I'd forgotten that. Thank you for the reminder.
Well, it's always good to have reminders along the way. I mean, there are people on the Isle of Man who say, "Well, charity begins at home. Why are we spending any money when we in Africa when we really need to be spending it here?"
Well, that's absolutely true. But then, if you look at the home as Africa, how do people who have nothing give money to charity? Actually, they do. How they do it, I do not know. But they, especially during Ramadan, they manage to find ways of raising a little bit of money to give to poorer people. But if charity begins at home, and home has got nothing, how can charity even begin? So, yes, obviously we want to support Manx charities and UK charities for bird watching, the RSPB, for instance. But it's good for us to have a wider aspect, a wider view of the world. We have, in the days of slavery, we have helped create the poverty in West Africa. And it's logical that if you don't like to see people suffering, then you should do something for them. Either something practical or maybe something as simple as giving a few quid to a charity, and it doesn't matter which charity it is, but we should, our horizons should be further than just the coast of the Isle of Man. There's a big world out there, and there are plenty of problems, and why not? Why shouldn't we help? Why not?
And Liz, the charity that you're supporting, remind us again the name of the charity and how people can potentially support that.
I should start by Googling Bansang Hospital Appeal. It's an amazing story what Anita Smith has been able to do since going there in 1992 as a tourist, and it's really heartwarming to read their website.
We're hoping to get out there again, or we're planning to get out there again at the end of October and beginning of November. We have in the past gone in February and March, but there's one particular bird, the crocodile bird it's called. Its real name is Egyptian plover, which is rather boring, but crocodile bird describes it beautifully, because when crocodiles open their mouths as they're basking on the banks, the crocodile bird goes along and picks out meat from between the teeth of the crocodile. It cleans, it's a dentist if you like, it cleans the teeth of the crocodile bird. And if we go out there in November, there's a good chance of seeing this exotic, beautiful and rather weird plover. So the next trip's at the end of October, beginning of November.
The birds don't get eaten by the crocodiles then?
No, the crocodiles quite appreciate having the itchy bits picked out from between their teeth. It's a symbiotic relationship, as they say. It benefits both the crocodile and the bird.
Crocodiles, I mean, they sound scary things, but you mentioned earlier, Liz, hippopotamus. I remember being told, I forget whether, well, I don't know whether this was a correct thing to be told or not, but hippos were deemed to be the most dangerous animal in Africa.
For a vegetarian, yes, they are. They're just particularly snappy, I guess is the word.
They're protective of their young, like most animals, but they've got the equipment to do a huge amount of damage. I can't remember the statistics of a hippo's the spread of its jaws, but it could certainly chomp through me quite easily.
It's really inspiring to hear from Liz, Tim and Moreblessing about their selfless approach to helping people whose lives are unimaginably difficult compared with our own. Don't forget this programme is available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. For now though, I'm Phil Gorn. Goramayo. Thanks for listening.